Lisa Stewart is Managing Director at JLL and longtime UW Advisory Board member. Today, she shares her passion for the city of Seattle and our local real estate market. Hello, Lisa. Thanks for coming on with us today.
My pleasure. Nice to see you guys.
Hi, Lisa.
Hey there.
Well, let's jump right in. So, Lisa, help us to understand how you connected and got into real estate.
It connected and got into was a little bit of an accident, because certainly graduating from the University of Washington about an eon ago, I didn't even really know what commercial real estate was. And so I was on my way to New York to become an investment banker, like many of my cohort at that time, and ended up with a part-time summer receptionist job for a commercial real estate firm. And it was meant to be temporary before I went to New York to do all of this interviewing. I did it for, 3 months during the summer, headed off to New York, did a last boondoggle, came back to Seattle and looked at my dad for a ticket back to New York again to start my life. And he said, no, and you better get a job. And about that time, that same commercial real estate company called back and had a project for me to work on. And here I am 35 years later.
I think that's funny. So many people that I've spoken with have gotten into real estate by accident. So it's funny that you mentioned that. That's sort of how I got into it myself. So yeah. Can definitely relate to that.
Well, I think that it's an interesting industry for sure. In part, what I love about it is how tangible real estate is. Had I disappeared off to the East Coast and gone into investment banking, it's just not as tangible. Stocks and bonds and all of this other thing, you can't do anything with it, and you certainly don't influence the way that it impacts your life or your city. And so I've had a lot of fun really learning about my city in a different way. And it translates not only into the physical assets of the buildings, but also all the companies and all the people that fill those buildings and live here.
How did you're 35 years in at this point.
Don't tell anybody that.
How did you come to connect with the University of Washington's real estate program?
Well, real estate, I've had a very wise person told me that real estate is a marathon on a short track. And what I mean by that is you go round and round and round, but you cross paths with the same people, the same companies, the same buildings over and over again. And so my trip onto the Runstad Center board was exactly that. It was through a work colleague, Greg Johnson, and I had done some work for Right Runstad. And Greg called, and when a client calls, you say yes. And it's been a nice decade worth of experience and journey, and something that I'm really proud to have been a part of.
Well, it certainly is a wonderful program. I know I am really enjoying it so far. Looking forward to the next couple of quarters.
Well, that's great. It's come a long way for sure from when we were sitting there as just industry professionals trying to figure out how to grow ourselves some great new real estate talent. And it was a great opportunity for us to really think about what we as people who hire students want and be able to influence that.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Maybe shifting gears a little bit, maybe you can tell us a little bit more for those of us who aren't as familiar with JLL, kind of about what they do and more specifically what your role is within the company.
Sure. Well, JLL is on the service sides of the real estate industry, the commercial real estate industry. It is a service-based company on almost every level that you can think of. So there is a property management component to take care of the buildings. There's an investment services group that I loosely sit under, which is servicing those people, those companies who invest in real estate. There's capital markets, which is more about the selling, the buying and selling of commercial assets. There's corporate services that is about taking care of the users of space. And then there are all of the different verticals, the industrial, multifamily, office, retail, hospitality, all of those fit under this big global umbrella that is JLL. And then my role is, I mentioned I'm on the investor side. So I do what we call agency leasing. And I just represent landlords who own office buildings in Seattle. So it goes from this wide down to very narrow. And my role within JLL is that I oversee our agency practice. So it's a bit of a player coach model from that standpoint, and then also sit on our national agency leasing executive committee to help set direction and process strategy for our national platform.
You seem like you're very passionate about Seattle, and I feel like you really have to be in order to achieve success within your industry. You have to really show that passion.
Well, it's an easy thing, but real estate, the first three words that I'm sure you learned in the program is location, location, location. No matter what aspect of real estate you participate in, that's a fundamental piece of it. And being in the city of Seattle, half of my job is getting companies to want to be in Seattle as well. So being part of the fabric of the community, caring about the community, and influencing what goes on in our city just is part and parcel with this role. And if I'm not passionate about it, how can I sell that to someone else and therefore get them to pay a lot of rent for office space to help make my clients some money?
How many clients would you say are in your portfolio, folks that you deal with?
Well, we have, we've got about 18 million square feet of office product that we represent. And I haven't counted clients in a while, but that's probably 30 clients maybe across Puget Sound. And so our practice is primarily institutional clients. So those clients, names that you've heard of, the big banks, the big pension funds, that invest in real estate, and then therefore that's why they need us. They're the investor, and they need the experts on the ground to help them understand markets and then actually execute on the leases to fill the buildings.
You've been in this market for some time now. I read an article the other week that said Seattle is now surpassing, I think it was Manhattan, in terms of foreign investment. For Seattle. Can you maybe talk about how that has changed over the years and where we are now?
Well, I think that, Seattle has really grown up over the last 25 years or so, where it was a little dot in the left corner of the country and wasn't on the radar of even some of the New Yorkers and the San Franciscans and some of the other places where the big financial institutions existed. And then what's happened, I would give large credit to the nature of the companies who've chosen to be here. So having Amazon and Microsoft grow up here have been absolutely the keystone in us becoming a global city. So, and those companies then need real estate, and those companies have a credit profile that means the institutional investor wants to own buildings that have that quality of tenancy in them. And as it has developed, nationally, I mean, Microsoft and Amazon do pretty well on the global platform as well. So it's made it a really easy answer for the international investing as well.
Yeah, it certainly appears that way. We talk a lot in our classes about COVID-19 and how the pandemic has affected the real estate market, and I always like to get everybody's take on the pandemic and what the future might look like. You want to offer any insight as to what your thoughts are about that?
Well, I've had lots of thoughts. I've had lots of time to think about it, of course, but we came from a commercial real estate standpoint, really an office standpoint, which is what I know best. We were coming off of almost a 12-year upcycle. And we all knew, those of us who've been in this business for any period of time know that real estate is cyclical. And so, us old people have been sitting there going, okay, it can't keep going. It can't keep going. What's going to bring a change in that cycle? But none of the fundamentals in Seattle were pointing toward that. I mean, I come back again to the tenancy, and the tenancy was growing. These companies were thriving. People are continuing to want to move to Seattle. Everything was just like, okay, keep going. And then all of a sudden, the brakes get slammed on and everybody goes through the front windshield. So it was not a typical stop to a cycle, which is usually, the awful death by 1,000 cuts. You see it coming, and then it just skids down. What's been unique about this from my perspective is that it has not been a financial crisis. It has not been, it's not local. There's nothing that we did or that we could undo. And so it was really a chance for everybody to sit back and say, what should we, what are we going to do now? And sending everybody home I left my desk on March something, and they told us 2 weeks. So I took, a stack of files about like this in my laptop, and I went home and didn't have any idea that we were all going to sit at home and figure out how to continue to carry on our business for like 15 months. So I don't know where I'm going with all this, but we were fortunate in Seattle that we hit that through the windshield in as good of a position as anyone. Our office market was fully leased for all intents and purposes. The credit profile of the tenants that pay rent, the office tenants I'm talking about that pay rent, was very, very strong. Our construction pipeline was very moderated. We had delivered a cohort of buildings that just before the pandemic hit, and really had perfect visibility into what was coming over the next 2 years, and it wasn't overdone. So we started in actually a really nice place. I think that where the angst was, and still is, frankly, is what does the future of office space use look like? And it is, I still don't think we know. I think, our company brought everybody back to the office within the parameters that were allowable last September, with the idea that how can we advise our clients on how to do this safely if we can't do it ourselves? And what we've learned over the last, call it 6 months of being, having a decent sized critical mass back in the office, is the value of that human connection. And more than anything, the transfer of information that happens spontaneously. That the things that don't warrant an email, that you wouldn't just pick up the phone and say, hey, I just heard this, but that stuff that truly happens in the hallways. And so I'm kind of wandering here a bit, but I think it's that people don't know that they have missed. And that's what's going to be worth the commute. And that's where the future productivity is going to come from. So I'm very optimistic going forward, and think that our normal is going to look a little bit differently, or a little bit different than it did in the past. Flexibility is going to be very important, because the other thing that we've learned over the last 5 years is that office real estate decisions in the past were really driven, they were CFO, CEO decisions on the office front. And in the last 5+ years, they're really HR decisions. They're HR driven. So office space is really about the chase for talent and the ability to recruit and retain great employees, and the role that the office plays in that. So I think that office space and the advantages of it are going to bring people, they're a tool to bring people back, but there will always be this sense of flexibility to make sure that the employee feels like they have control, and that you don't lose an employee over too strict of a box.
Sure. I love the sense of optimism. I'm hearing that more around this area, and I think it's great. Well, I'm sure over the last year and a half or so, we all picked up an extra hobby or read a couple extra books. Tell us about maybe what are some of your favorite books and hobbies, or any charities you're involved with? What do you like to do when you're not out there in the market working?
Well, I think in terms of, I had great aspirations during COVID. I was ready to, I love jigsaw puzzles, and all my friends are doing jigsaw puzzles and trading and whatever. And I found I was just working my tail off on these Zoom calls. All of a sudden my day was way more structured than it was. And, but I did find some time to read. My favorite books though, I think one of my top ones is Lonesome Dove. I don't know if anybody's ever read the epic cattle drive from Texas to Montana. Definitely put it on your list. It takes you back to a time that was much more simple than COVID Seattle in 2020. So that was great. And and I think the rest of my time has been gardening. So we have a piece of property that needed a lot of work. And so I've been wearing overalls on the weekend. It's awesome.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all your insights in real estate and JLL and all you do for the advisory board. If someone wants to reach out and connect with you, what would be the best way for them to do so?
Well, they're welcome. I'm on LinkedIn a fair amount. Also, I'm good at email. So I'm lisa.stewart@am.jll.com, and happy to hear from people that way as well.
Excellent. Well, Lisa, thanks for coming on. Anthony, thanks for helping out co-hosting today.
Thank you both.
Look forward to getting back in person and getting in the office.
Amen. Thank you both.